In this section, we begin the very first set of hands-on actions for our cluster environment. This is where we move from theory into actual implementation. And even though this part may look simple, it is absolutely essential. Before we install anything, before we configure pacemaker or CoreSync, we must ensure that all of our cluster nodes can properly recognize each other. So our objective here is clear. We will log into each of the 3 cluster nodes, NodeA, NodeB, and NodeC. We will confirm their host names, verify their operating system versions, and then configure the /etc/hosts file on every machine. By doing this, we establish a reliable foundation so that each node can consistently identify, resolve, and communicate with the others, using clean and predictable host names. To begin, we first open the required lab materials and documents. This helps us follow the configuration steps in the correct order. Next, we need to access the web SSH links provided by our administrator. These links allow us to connect to our cluster nodes using a browser-based terminal. So, I copy the link for NodeA and open it directly in my web browser. Once I press enter, I wait a moment for the secure connection to establish. After NodeA loads successfully, I then repeat the exact same process for NodeB and NodeC, each in its own browser tab. By the end of this step, I have 3 terminal windows open. One for NodeA, one for NodeB, and one for NodeC. This layout will make it much easier to switch between them. Now that we are connected, we begin with NodeA, the first cluster node. I start by clearing the screen to keep the terminal neat and easy to read. Then I run the hostname command. Seeing the correct hostname, NodeA confirms that we are inside the correct machine, and everything matches the expected naming conventions from our lab document. Once the hostname is confirmed, I verify the operating system release by checking the /etc/os release file. This is a quick but important step because all 3 nodes must be running the same RH436 version to avoid compatibility issues later in the cluster setup. Next, I switch to the terminal for NodeB. Just like before, I begin by clearing the screen. Then I check the hostname to make sure this node is correctly identified as NodeB. This helps us avoid confusion when configuring multiple servers simultaneously. I then verify the OS version on NodeB as well. This allows me to confirm that NodeB matches NodeA in terms of major and minor operating system versions. Now I move to the terminal for NodeC, the 3rd cluster node. Again, I clear the terminal for visibility and run the hostname command. The correct name, NodeC, confirms that we are on the final node. I also check the operating system version here, which completes the identity and OS verification process for all 3 machines. At this point, we know that each node is reachable, correctly named, and running the appropriate OS version. This means we can safely move forward to configure hostname resolution. Next, I return to NodeA and open the /etc/hosts file. This file is responsible for mapping hostnames to IP addresses. By adding the correct entries here, we ensure that pacemaker, CoreSync, and all future cluster operations can resolve each node using its hostname, without depending on external DNS. To find the IP addresses for each node, you can run the IPA command inside each terminal. This will show you the private network address assigned to every machine. After noting the correct addresses, I enter the IPs and hostnames for NodeA, NodeB, and NodeC, exactly as defined in the lab document. Accuracy is extremely important here. A single missing character or incorrect IP can cause the cluster to misbehave or fail to communicate properly. Next, I repeat the same update process on NodeB. Since the host entries must be identical on all nodes. An easy way to do this is to simply copy the lines from NodeA's hosts file and paste them into NodeB. This ensures consistency and prevents errors. Finally, I update the hosts file on NodeC in the same way. Once these entries are added and saved, all three machines have consistent hostname mappings, which is exactly what the cluster requires. After finishing the entries on all nodes, I test connectivity from NodeA to NodeB and NodeC using their host names. I do this with a simple ping test. When the replies come back successfully, it confirms that the system can now resolve each hostname correctly through the hosts file. With hostname resolution configured across all nodes, our cluster now has a clean and reliable communication foundation. This completes the second milestone. In the next section, we will begin installing the high availability packages required for Pacemaker, ChorusSync, and the PCSD service.